Today we are honored to welcome Caleb Granger to the show today. I'm very excited to have him on today. He is very prominent in the field of stem cells and regenerative medicine. So today we're going to learn all about stem cells, how we can actually amplify them in our own lives, as well as all the amazing treatments that are upcoming out there. And he has an amazing story that I would like to get into. But basically, being an expert in stem cells and regenerative medicine, we're going to really learn the tools to take control of our health and wellness and go beyond that to live a life of longevity. So I'm very excited to have him on. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing really well, Anthony. Thank you for having me. Excited
Absolutely.
to talk.
So I'm very curious to hear your story and how you got into regenerative medicine and stem cells and how you're helping people today.
Sure. Well, one of the most important things that I want your audience to understand is that today we can reproducibly raise your body's regenerative capacity. And so when we do that, right, that's essentially what aging is when your body's normal regenerative capacity is overwhelmed by degeneration. When that point comes where degeneration overwhelms your regenerative capacity, now you are aging, right? And when we're kids, our regenerative capacity is really high. For instance, you break your arm when you're a kid, and you have the regenerative capacity naturally in your body to heal that break and have your arm be stronger and bigger and more healthy than before the break. That's because that regenerative capacity overwhelms your degeneration. At some point, that switches over, and the amount of degeneration, genetically, environmentally, self-inflicted, that overwhelms your regenerative capacity. What we can do now, reproducibly and 100% naturally, is raise your gross regenerative capacity in your body using your own regenerative tools and then adding into that until that regenerative capacity once again overwhelms the degeneration that you face. So that is the definition of anti-aging, of aging in reverse. And we are reproducibly able to do that. It's not science fiction. It is being done with 60 and 90-day protocols throughout the US with providers every day. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing. And I got to that through working in surgery, in neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery, and spine surgery now for 26 years. 3 years ago, I started working in the regenerative space, and we at Apex Regenerative now produce placental and umbilical mesenchymal stem cell exosomes. That's one of the main, that's kind of the foundation of our regenerative protocols, are these exosomes. Many people are familiar with stem cells, right? Stem cells are kind of the healing factories that our own bodies produce. They are the healing cells that regenerate all of our tissues and organs and bodily systems. When we're young, we have the most stem cells kind of per cell. Our bodies produce the most stem cells every day, and the stem cells that we produce are the most potent and healing. That reaches a peak when we're about 17 or 18 years old. And of course, that makes sense, right? We heal, you fall down, you break a bone, you get sick, and you heal really quickly when you're a kid. After about 17 or 18, all of those three things, the number of stem cells, the potency of the stem cells, and the percentage of stem cells as a portion of the new cells that your body produces every day, those three all drop. And so by the time you get to be, for instance, my age, 50 years old, they've dropped precipitously, right? Multiple double-digit percentages. By the time you're 80 or 90, you have almost no stem cells. You almost produce no stem cells. And the stem cells that you have are not very potent, right? And so when stem cells do their healing in your body, if you got a stem cell transfusion, we now know the way they heal, the way they communicate with the other cells is through these tiny particles called exosomes, EXOSOMES. These tiny particles are about 1/1000th the size of a cell. They are secreted from the stem cells, from the source cells. They're secreted out of every cell. Exosomes are. That's how cells communicate. Specifically, though, out of stem cells, the stem cell produces all the proteins, growth factors, and regenerative signals to heal every tissue in your body. Every tissue, brain tissue, ocular tissue, right? Your eyes, the tissues in your inner ear, your heart, your lungs, your capillaries, everything. Uh, the ability to heal and generate those things comes from your stem cells. What we do is we take the most potent and generative cells that the human body ever produces, which are 0 day old placental, live tissue placental mesenchymal stem cells, and live tissue umbilical mesenchymal stem cells. We take those cells at day 0 after a healthy full term delivered pregnancy, US only, from FDA and American Association of Tissue Bank accredited and audited facilities. Take those cells, elicit the exosomes from those cells that carry all the proteins, growth factors, and regenerative signals, process, package, and deliver them in good manufacturing practice, CGMP, Class 2 clean room facilities here in the US, and produce those. We can give those out in a variety of modalities to be used systemically, to be used in an acute way in joints or tissue that are degenerated or inflammatory, sublingually or intranasally. So intranasal gets exosomes within the first hour into the midbrain and hippocampus. 90% are in the midbrain and hippocampus within an hour, taking away inflammation and regenerating brain tissue. And wherever the exosomes go, they seek out any deficit from perfect and start repairing that deficit. And it's just a matter of how big the deficit is, right? What the condition is, the severity of the condition, the duration of the condition, times how many exosomes of what quality over what period of time. And that's the equation. If we can provide enough exosomes over enough period of time, what we see in close to 13,000 patients that we've treated, and there's hundreds of thousands of patients in the peer-reviewed published literature, the medical literature that's published and available for the public to see, what we see is stem cell exosomes are stopping and reversing every degenerative or inflammatory condition that we face as humans. So just super exciting.
Yeah,
And I know
definitely exciting, man.
yeah, it really is. That is a mouthful, I know.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like the body has an innate regenerative capacity, but
Yes,
as we age, it kind of decreases, right? And stem cells are really the key to kind of regenerating that and living a life of longevity. Do I have that right?
you're exactly right.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So,
another component, Anthony, is the cellular power, right? One of the things that also declines with age, about 50% every 20 years, is your cellular battery pack. All your cells have a battery pack essentially, and they all run off of a single molecule called NAD plus. A lot of people are familiar with NAD. Real popular to get NAD IVs or an NAD intramuscular injection or take an oral NAD supplement. One of the challenges with all of those things is that they all simply raise your NAD blood plasma level. So your total amount of NAD in your body goes up. What doesn't go up is your intracellular NAD, the amount of NAD in your cell. And that's really where it matters. That's how NAD is used as the intercellular power pack. What we have with a product that is called a lathmized, that's a proprietary methodology for production, lathmized NAD. It's an oral supplementation, dissolves, it's a powder that dissolves in water. You swish and swallow for 90 seconds. Do that daily. And we can reproducibly in humans raise your intracellular NAD on average 53% in 5 days, 300% over 60 days. So we can reproducibly take a middle-aged human like me and bring my intracellular NAD level, my intracellular power pack back up to where it was when I was 18 years old. So that becomes kind of the two pillars of how we treat and how we do our regenerative anti-aging protocols is we increase your cellular power with LNAD plus, lathmized NAD, and then we show your cells, those new powered up cells, where and how to heal with stem cell exosomes.
yeah, that's awesome, man. So, NAD, that's nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Is that right?
That's right. Say that fast 5 times.
Yeah, and there's many different forms of that, right? It's basically the thing that is responsible for repairing DNA. Is that right?
Mhm. That's right.
Yeah. What are the different forms actually that kind of make up that and the different benefits that we see?
Yeah, so with NAD, again, just in layman's terms, it's your cellular power level. And so when those drop, your cellular power drops, meaning their ability to regenerate. Cells, stem cells that are meant to regenerate have less ability to do that. When we can increase that cellular power, they have more ability. Uh, there's different versions. You can take what are called precursors that lead your body to increase your NAD level. Some of those have been shown to temporarily, uh, on at a low level, increase your intracellular NAD while you're taking them. You also have to take a fair amount. Studies show like 3 grams per day is a level that gets kind of a transient increase in intracellular NAD. So we're actually supplementing with NAD, but instead of all the other NAD supplements, including IV, including IM, including NAD orally, we're the only one that's been shown to increase your intracellular NAD in humans. So uh, even that by itself, just increasing the regenerative power without increasing the regenerative volume, right? Increasing your total regenerative capacity, like we do with exosomes, just by increasing your regenerative power of your current regenerative capacity, we've seen incredible results in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any neuromuscular disease, just with doing LNAD plus. When we put both of those together, right, raise the cellular power and show those newly powered up cells where and how to heal, we get incredible results. Uh, Tissue regeneration is one of the big ones. Um, Cartilage regeneration, bone on bone, knees, hips, elbows, shoulders, all the orthopedic applications, we get incredible regenerative results in 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old folks who have been told specifically that, hey, surgery or joint replacement is their only good option. This takes away inflammation and regenerates like native tissue at the joint, which kind of nothing else really does.
Awesome. And in my understanding, there's some natural strategies that kind of increase NAD. Is that right?
That's not really where we focus. I'm sure there is, right, through diet and sleep regulation and these sorts of things. Really, the customers that we end up working with, the patients that we end up working with, many times have reached the end of where they can get on their own. And lots of times they have chronic issues, 5, 10, 15 years or more that they've been dealing with something and dealing with degeneration and, have gone through what the medical industrial complex has given them. Usually, what people deal with when they have a degenerative or inflammatory condition, what are you given, right? You're given anti-inflammatories, you're given steroid shots, maybe you're given a regenerative option that's PRP, platelet-rich plasma, something that's really popular. You do a blood draw, spin that down in a centrifuge. It concentrates your own blood and plasma, and then you put that, 8 to 10 times concentration into an acute area, right? Those are kind of the options that people get, and then there's surgery. Well, surgery is always destructive to native anatomy, right? You don't ever do a surgery and get more native anatomy. It's always removing, right? At the best. So if people can avoid surgery, this is something, of course, that they want to do. If they can avoid pharmacological intervention or get off of a pharmacological intervention, that's great as well. And so that's really where we end up getting patients on these protocols is when they have multiple pharmacological interventions. Maybe they've tried some other quote unquote, kind of 2 generation old regenerative protocol like a PRP and found that to be inflammatory and didn't really heal, right? Which makes sense that they are inflammatory. Cells are inflammatory, even your own cells are naturally inflammatory when they go back into your body. Your body tries to kill those things, and they don't contain an incredible amount of regenerative properties. You know, many times less than what we do with even one of our treatments. So it makes sense often that people don't get great results with those. Steroids are a acidic degenerative compound. For instance, no doctor in good standing will give a steroid injection into an Achilles tendon. For Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy, there really hasn't been a great option because you can't use steroids there. That tendon carries the most tensile strength, has the greatest load of any tendon in your body. And doctors know if you put steroids into that tendon, it eats away the tendon. Well, it does the same thing when you put it into a joint. It eats away the internal components of the joint. So while it does potentially, for a short time, block some of the pain generators in that area and give you some pain resolution, you're doing it at the expense of ongoing joint health. You're actually eating away the joint even faster. And so that's what's so different about what we're doing with stem cell exosomes. Even if you do one treatment, that one treatment, it can only do two things. It can only totally heal or partially heal. It's never going to do nothing. It's never going to go in reverse. Any symptom resolution that you get is going to be symptom resolution caused by healing the source of the symptom, not just upregulating, one receptor or downregulating the other. And then when you stop taking it, well, now you're even worse than when you started. Every time you do stem cell exosomes, even one application, you're raising your total health level and creating kind of a new baseline of health.
Awesome. So you're like a fan of supplementation when it comes to NAD?
Say that one more time.
You're a fan of supplementation then
Do we have supplementation?
for the NAD?
Yeah, we sure do.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes, we have a daily, it's a powder, and then we have a sublingual lozenge as well. And it delivers in a 60-day time period. Just to give an idea, right? If you do an IV, typically an NAD IV will be 200 to 500 milligrams, maybe up to 750 milligrams. When you do that, there's a plaque enzyme response. Your body responds to being flooded with exogenous NAD. That response is to get the NAD out of your body, right? And so all the NAD gets flushed out of your body within 24 hours when you get an IV. And it comes with this response where if you've ever gotten an IV, you really have to meter. You can't just do an IV push of 700 milligrams of NAD. You will have a massive response to it. People have arrhythmias. They feel sick to their stomach. You start sweating. That is that plaque enzyme response to your body being overwhelmed with NAD. None of that gets into the cell. It's only raising your blood plasma NAD levels. With our 60-day cellular reset program, where we can reproducibly increase your intracellular NAD 300% in 60 days. That is taken daily, and it's 36,000 milligrams over 60 days. It's the equivalent of, something like 75 or 100 NAD IVs taken over 60 days. So just a massive amount, and none of it raises your blood plasma NAD level. It's only raising your intracellular NAD. So there is no plaque enzyme response because it's not interacting with your blood plasma. It's just going straight into the cell.
Awesome. So when it comes to exosomes, those are basically signaling molecules that make stem cells more effective and activated. So can you explain more about that and how those interact with each other?
Sure. So exosomes are kind of the information carrying microparticle that come out from all cells. For instance, people will Google exosomes, and one of Google AI's prompts is the dark side of exosomes, right? And so, of course, everybody goes there. The dark side of exosomes is that cancer cells, also, they're a cell, they also secrete cancer cell exosomes, right? And so people say, oh my gosh, this shows cancer. No. Mesenchymal stem cells from placental mesenchymal stem cells used therapeutically have never been shown to increase cancer, to bring back cancer, or to cause cancer. And in the last year, there's been about 20 studies where exosomes were used, again, therapeutic mesenchymal stem cell exosomes were used as an index treatment to fight cancer, specifically. Cervical cancer, glioblastoma, and breast cancer are three that I'm really familiar with, where there's studies that show that it shrunk the active cells and blocked new cells from forming. So the quote unquote dark side is all cells use exosomes. Exosomes are the language of cellular communication, right? It's how cells communicate. What we do is we take those most generative cells that the body ever produces, the mesenchymal stem cells from the placental material, have spent, when we get them, they've just spent the last 9 months processing everything that was needed to create an entire perfect human being from 2 cells, right? So those mesenchymal stem cells in the placenta have processed all that was needed to create perfect brain, perfect bones, perfect heart, perfect lungs, perfect skin, perfect eyes, right? All those things. We get them at day 0 after a healthy, full term delivered pregnancy, are able to get a bunch of those cells out of that tissue, elicit the exosomes from those cells, and the next thing they do is get into your body and try to do the same thing they've just been tasked with doing, right? Which is generate perfect organs, systems, cells, etc. And so we, for instance, one IV, which is kind of the main thing that an IV push that gives us the greatest regenerative boost immediately is 500 million placental mesenchymal stem cells worth of healing in one IV. So just a massive, massive amount.
Wow.
And then we do daily sublingual to supplement that. 10 billion exosomes sublingual through a sublingual spray. It gets into your sublingual glands and perfuses throughout your body, bypasses kidney and liver. So super effective, super efficient. Great for people who don't want, to do a needle stick, right? Some people don't like IVs. Who loves IVs, really? But some people really won't do an IV. Okay, well, this is a really efficient way to be able to do that for brain-based or skull-based conditions, right? All of the uh, uh, what am I thinking? Dementias. So vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, pediatric autism, anything brain-based or skull-based that is degenerative or inflammatory, intranasal exosomes are being used to stop and reverse. Traumatic brain injury, depression, those are some of the most gratifying patients are when we can get people off of 15 years of full-time SSRI use, and in 6 weeks or 8 weeks are off of SSRIs and functioning. Same thing with autism. Those are absolutely the most gratifying because those parents, right? I'm a father of a 15-year-old. To imagine having your kid who is nonverbal, non-locomotive, and maybe you've seen these symptoms get worse over time, right? The kid that you love, nonverbal, non-locomotive, can't make eye contact, doesn't make eye contact, to put them on intranasal. And I'm thinking of a text I got from a family saying, with that type of a child, saying essentially he won't shut up and he's pacing around his room, like so he went from a non-locomotive and non-verbal to talking a mile a minute and pacing around his room. So, what an incredible, and especially just those are so great because it's there hasn't been a really good solution in the medical industrial complex, and it's just there's so much love and focus that parents have on their kiddos to be able to do something like this that's 100% natural, that you can't take a toxic amount of, right? You can't overdose on it. There's no no contraindications. You can take it with any other condition that you have. One of the things that we're so used to as a culture is, for instance, when you have, as a middle-aged guy like me, a lot of us are getting on testosterone replacement, right? That's a super popular thing. And you do that when your natural testosterone production has fallen and you're not producing enough natural testosterone. So you get on exogenous testosterone. Well, what happens to your natural testosterone production once you get on exogenous testosterone? Your natural production drops even further. It was already low, right? You take in a bunch of extra testosterone and your body says, okay, well, I don't even need to do testosterone at all. I don't have to produce any at all. If you ever get off of that testosterone, then you are now significantly worse off than you were before. That example is what happens with the entire pharmacological intervention is just like that, right? You're essentially buying symptom relief in the short term at the expense of the long-term issue getting even worse. It's the exact opposite with stem cell exosomes. You get symptom resolution, but you're doing it by increasing the health of the organs and systems and receptors that led to the problem in the first place.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Like stem cells are fascinating. What are the different types of stem cells that we see? Because I know there's a variety of stem cells and they have different purposes. So could we get into that?
Um, yeah, I guess when as far as it relates to exosomes and how they're harvested, and used, again, exosomes can come from every cell. So what you see is, for instance, uh, we can classify which proteins, growth factors, and regenerative signals are in the exosome. They're the ones that the source cell created, right? And so we can quantify those things, which ones in which concentrations. What we know is the top of the pyramid that has the most proteins, growth factors, and regenerative signals in the highest concentrations are placental mesenchymal stem cells. One step below that, about 1/3 less, right, of all the healing and regenerative signals are umbilical derived mesenchymal stem cells. So still super powerful, but demonstrably less powerful than placental derived. One step below those are bone marrow derived. So taken from the iliac crest, right, around your hip. That's an abundant source for marrow, and those also, there's a kind of a concentrated area of stem cells. Those have even less than the umbilical derived. Then there's adipose derived, fat cell derived exosomes. Those exosomes also don't really have regenerative signaling. They have kind of anti-inflammatory, skin producing, collagen producing. Plasma derived is another one. That's essentially no regenerative quality, simply transient anti-inflammatory qualities are contained in those exosomes. So all those exosomes are available and have various uses. The most regenerative are the stem cell exosomes from placental and umbilical material, and those are the only two that we use.
Got it. So when it comes to stem cells, are there also some natural strategies we can do on a day-to-day basis that we can kind of amplify and have them more proliferated in our own bodies?
Yeah, I think there might be, and again, that's not something that I'm an expert on, uh, but I think probably normal kind of health, diet and sleep and all the good things that you would expect, and that is so hard for people, nowadays in modern society, uh, are probably the same strategies that you would use to try to increase those things.
That makes sense. So when it comes to the sourcing of stem cells, I'm pretty sure that's important, right? Just
Mhm.
making sure you're getting high quality stem cells. Like, what are different sources? I know you kind of alluded to it, but it's like, what should people be looking for?
Sure. Well, one, you want them to be sourced in the US from FDA and AATB accredited facilities. Regardless of how you feel about the FDA or kind of government entities, there is strict criteria and auditing that goes on, and a significant amount of donated tissue that has a standard operating procedure for how it could be sourced, processed, manufactured, packaged, and delivered that has been locked in over the last 50 years by the FDA and American Association of Tissue Banks. So that is wildly safe. You think about all the donated blood, plasma, skin grafts, just a variety of things that are processed daily and have been for decades and decades without any issue. Well, that's a tribute to these levels of standard operating procedure that are in place. And so, uh, for instance, they don't have that or anything like that governing body certification and accreditation in Mexico. You know, they just simply don't have that. They don't have that in Thailand or South Korea. So I would be wary of products that are made outside the US with live human tissue. Then beyond that, like I just mentioned, there are different sources within the body that just produce lower concentration, less potent, less generative cells, right? A fat cell was never designed to create a perfect heart, right? It was a fat cell. A placental mesenchymal stem cell processed everything that was needed to create a perfect heart, to create perfect lungs, bone, skin, eyes, hair, etc. And so, adipose-derived exosome will never have the regenerative capacity, regardless of how concentrated it is, regardless of how it's put in or how it's applied. It just simply doesn't have the generative capacity that a placental or umbilical live tissue-derived stem cell exosome does. Another thing is that you see is that one of the methods that is used, and it's essentially a cost-saving method, is instead of having one donor donate their material, taking that material, getting the live cells from that material, getting the exosomes from themselves, instead of that, companies like mine can buy a master cell lineage, one single master cell lineage. There's a company, market leader, that uses a 34-year-old South Korean man's master cell lineage, right? And they've continued to cell culture, replicate that master cell lineage over and over and over again. And the value in that for a company is it's a lot cheaper, right? You can make a copy of a copy of a copy. They nature the cells in petri dishes, feed it protein, and it replicates over and over and over again. The downside of that clinically is that just like a Xerox copy, you take an original and copy it, and then take that copy and copy that, take that copy and copy that. Well, there's a pretty quick and pronounced degradation in the clarity of what you're getting. Same thing happens when you do multiple hundreds and hundreds of thousands of cell cultures over and over again of a single master cell lineage, is you get a pretty harsh degradation in potency. And so that's a well-established thing. It then takes more and more of those cells to get even what you were getting 2 years ago from that original master lineage. And so we don't do that. We use only live tissue derived mesenchymal stem cell exosomes. And as a result, we get really reproducible, regenerative and healing results.
Got it. That makes sense. And to my understanding, they also can be derived from fat or bone. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And again, those are, if you look at which ones are most potent, most concentrated, carry the most proteins, growth factors, and regenerative signals. For instance, fat cells will have less than 100 proteins, growth factors, and regenerative signals. Placental-derived mesenchymal stem cells have more than 3,000, right? So there's a massive difference in the generative capacity of even one-for-one exosome from each of these types of cells. Placental is the most concentrated, most potent. Umbilical-derived, next potent. Bone marrow-derived, third. Fat cell-derived, fourth. Platelet-derived, fifth. And so kind of the weakest, least regenerative, just simply anti-inflammatory for a short period of time. That's kind of how they rank from top to bottom in terms of generative capacity and potency.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now,
So,
of course, if you would, as you can imagine, if it's less expensive to produce, right? If you can replicate it over and over again, and it's from a less potent source, right? It's easier to get fat than it is to get a live tissue placenta, and easier to process. And so, of course, those things can potentially end up costing less to the patient. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it just costs less to the provider, and the provider marks them up to the same amount. But ultimately, it's a lower cost, lower potency, significantly less healing potentiality when you start talking about, platelet derived, fat derived, etc.
got it. Makes sense. So, is there any regenerative medicine therapies that are upcoming that you're excited about?
The main thing that is exciting for us is, for instance, 3 years ago when we would go and talk to MDs about stem cell exosomes, the majority who were familiar with stem cells, of course, stem cells themselves have a 25 year history. There's probably 7,000 randomized controlled trials using stem cells, throughout the world over the last 25 years. So massive amount of data on stem cells. Up until the late 20 teens, right? 2016, 2017, 2018, the thought was that stem cells worked in those therapeutic applications. They worked by staying alive, right? If you kept them alive, if you put them into the body in an area where you needed generation of native tissue, that they would engraft in the body, stay alive, engraft in the body, duplicate, and eventually help produce like native tissue, right? So if you put stem cells in the, you kept them alive, created a great environment for them, that eventually 60, 90 days later, they would start engrafting and turn into cartilage if you needed cartilage. What we now know, and what started to become apparent in the late 20 teens, is that that's not how stem cells work. In fact, stem cells, whether they're your own stem cells or stem cells taken from someone else, when they get into your body, when they're put back into your body is super effective at killing and flushing all of those stem cells. Your body sees those cells as a foreign invader and flushes them out. Within 24 hours, 99% of transplanted stem cells are killed or flushed. Now, the way they work is, and why someone can still have a good result or have some regeneration, is in that 24 hours, they are secreting exosomes. And so that was validated, has continued to be validated. Tens of thousands of papers show that, all in the late teens and here in the early 20s, show that stem cell data is actually exosome data, right? That's how stem cells work, is through the secretion of exosomes. In fact, the father of stem cells, a guy named Dr. Arnold Kaplan, who named stem cells mesenchymal stem cells, discovered them, named them. MSCs are MSCs because of Arnold Kaplan. In 2018, published a study saying that, in fact, mesenchymal stem cells should instead be called medicinal signaling cells because of what we now know about how they work. They don't engraft, they don't differentiate and duplicate and create new tissue. They signal for a short period of time. What they signal and the signals they send out are exosomes. And so that's what we know, is that exosomes, stem cell exosomes, are how stem cells work. So all of the data from the last 25 years on stem cells hasn't been, alleviated. It's not been obviated by exosomes being discovered. We just now know they worked through the mechanism of exosomes. So again, just kind of validating, this is the culmination of 25 to 30 years of stem cell studies and literature, and it's building off of that. And we now know we can do the exact same thing, just leave the inflammatory potential disease carrying, genetic load carrying cells, leave those behind, and just take the good stuff from the most potent stem cells that are available. And
Very, very
it's a
exciting.
lot safer, it's a lot more concentrated, and oftentimes in the market, it can be a third less. It can cost a third less to the patient. So be more cost effective.
Awesome. So, are you familiar with V cells and like the different types of treatments that go into that?
I'm not.
Okay. It's my understanding they're like it stands for very small embryonic like stem cells. So they're basically a lot smaller. It's like a different form of it.
Mm-hmm.
Something I was looking at recently, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, another thing that's popular is there's something called Muse cells, right? MUSE, and so Muse cell exosomes. I think right now, today, January of 26, the only real Muse cells are incredibly expensive to produce. Inherently, Muse cells are cells that are tougher to kill. And so in order to get the Muse cells, you kill all the other cells. And it's kind of like what's left over is the Muse cells, is the Muse stem cells. So just doing that, right? The amount of tissue that you have to get, the amount that you have to kill to get to the Muse cells means that what you end up with is inherently going to be incredibly expensive. And then there's also preservation techniques in order to preserve these cells and allow them to be used. I guess the main watch out for consumers is if you are in Boise and someone is offering you some Muse cell exosomes for $250, those are not Muse cells. Like this is something where it's literally tens of thousands of dollars, and actual Muse cells are available in Japan and United Arab Emirates, right? That's just functionally that's where they are now. And so like when you talk about the Kardashians famously used Muse cells, well, they literally did that in the UAE, right, in Dubai, and it is available there. It's available for a uh, six-figure fee, and that's realistic based on what it costs to actually produce those to scale.
Very fascinating.
So
So,
yeah, I was going to say that is a kind of for the future. It's something that does have a lot of promise because they are more robust. Uh, Yet, even those cells, those more robust cells, the same thing happens to them. The majority of them are killed within 24 to 72 hours, killed and flushed by your body. So again, it's just a little bit of an improvement on what are expensive exosome carriers, right? They're exosome transporters. That's what stem cells are. And so these are, yes, potentially can last a little bit longer and maybe be more concentrated, more powerful, but ultimately they're not better than doing trillions of MSCs worth of exosomes, which is what we can do in our protocols.
got it. So we've talked about price. Like, what are we looking at for a typical stem cell treatment? Like, what should people be looking at?
Yeah, so for instance, I mentioned with one IV, we do our typical placental derived IV is the equivalent of 500 million 0-day old placental mesenchymal stem cells worth of healing. That retails in most U.S. markets anywhere from 3,500 to 6,500 per IV. Just to give you an idea, for instance, with type 2 diabetics, we do a protocol over 3 or 4 months where we'll do 4 to 5 IVs, daily sublingual, and by 3 or 4 months, we see 10 years, 20 years of type 2 diabetes totally reversed. So people on insulin, on 2,500 milligrams of metformin, doing over 3 or 4 months, have their blood sugar drop from 350 to 95, get off of insulin, get off of metformin with no other lifestyle changes. So it's something where diabetes, for instance, is a pancreatic disorder where your pancreas is not processing insulin and blood sugar appropriately. Your insulin receptors are not processing insulin appropriately. Stem cell exosomes fix those things. Stem cell exosomes get your pancreas to start processing insulin and blood sugar appropriately, and your insulin receptors to process insulin appropriately. They heal those things. And so, that's the level of life change that is achievable when you talk about that concentration and that potency taken over a 90 to 100-day period.
Got it. Makes sense. I'm sure it's worth it, though, in terms of like the benefits that we see.
Well, I'll tell you, we end up we got about 30 NFL and NBA guys right now. Many of them either at the end of their career or just finished their career. Some of the NFL guys with CTE symptoms and kind of essentially traumatic brain injury symptoms on these protocols. Some of the biggest names in the UFC doing these protocols daily and weekly. And I mention that because these are folks where their body and their health, of course, is their source of income, right? Well, we're not all like that, but we all want those results, and that's a lead indicator when you start seeing these kind of guys, elite athletes, doing this regularly, even as a preventative or a regenerative kind of anti-aging component. That bodes well for folks like me, weekend warriors, and people, who are maximizing everything that they're doing. They're watching their diet, they're watching their sleep, they're watching their environmental inputs, and they want to maximize what they're doing. We can reproducibly, for let's call it 75 to $90,000 over the course of a year. Take your age-related biomarkers back 90 to 100%. 10 to 15 year resolution of your age-related biomarkers, A1C, AST, ALT, ESR, your SED rate, your CRP, your HSCRP is your kind of most discriminating measure of total body inflammation. We can reduce those things 90 to 100% in a year, which is the equivalent of 10 to 15 years of degeneration. And so we can reproducibly reverse those things. And that ends up being something, the felt effect of that, of course, is no orthopedic pain. It's all the things that are quality of life measures for people. And so that's what we're excited about. And even for people who don't have some chronic degenerative or inflammatory condition, just using it to reverse all those aging biomarkers and get the felt effect of that is something really powerful.
Awesome. So mesenchymal stem cells or something you mentioned, those are like for the joints and basically the cartilage. Is that right?
They're really, MSCs are used to repair everything. So every tissue, tendon, ligament, capillaries, nerve, all of those are healed by mesenchymal stem cells.
Got it. Makes sense. All right. Caleb, this has been awesome. Appreciate you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story with us, and all your insights about stem cells and how we can utilize them in our own lives, right? Because when we have some type of issue we're dealing with, it's best to have a wide array of tools that we know how to go forward with, right? And this is another one that can be very beneficial for people. Learning all the different types and different treatments is so important, and utilizing as we see fit in our own lives. So I thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if people want to get connected with you and your work, where can we find you?
Sure. The apexmedical.com is our website. And then encourage everybody to reach out to us on all socials, TikTok, IG, Facebook. We're at Apex Regenerative on all of those.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much.